Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. This is one of the most challenging presentations I've ever done. It's going to be on the theme of Fountainhead. It started out by talking about the parallels between Beethoven's Fifth and Fountainhead. So actually we're going to start with that. I'm going to put down, I see Fountainhead as being a symphony in 4 movements, very similar in structure, in a grand structure to Beethoven's Fifth. So I'm going to make that point first. So I'm going to put here in the corner. So what we are going to do is that I'm going to talk about the outer structure. I'm going to call it the outer structure of Fountainhead. So that's going to be the first point. The second, I'm going to talk about the theme. This is actually the newest thing that I have. I'm saying that if you look at the structure very carefully, there is a theme that actually captures the structure much better than anything else that I've seen. So I'm going to be talking about that theme. Then I'm going to be talking about, I'll call the appositions. Okay. Then I'll be talking about the inner structure, inner development, I will call it. This is mostly Dominique. And then finally, I have a test. And that is going to be Dagny versus Dominique. We have got these 2 teams here. I want to see if everything that I say allows me to resolve that conflict. So let me see here. I'm going to take this. Make it a little smaller right here. Okay, so let me get started. Okay, so first about the structure. So the structure is 4 parts. So there is 2 movements here and 2 movements here. So these are the 4 movements. The first one is Peter Keating in the honor of Gail Wine, and I'm going to Christian all the movements by the initials. So this is Howard Rourke. This is Ellsworth Toohey. So this is going to be first movement, second movement, third movement, and fourth movement. Okay. Now, if you're familiar with Beethoven's Fifth, it starts with a bang. Ba 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 bam. So the theme is named right in the beginning. Howard Rourke laughs. Then the second movement of Beethoven's Fifth, it's like the doldrums. It is like all the chaos that you would have to face. So you start at the bottom over there. The third movement starts somewhere here, which is a rise out, and it is a way of going forward. It is attempts to go forward in multiple times, but not quite making it. And then finally, you have the final movement, which starts off and takes off like a rocket. The fourth movement. Okay, so this one goes like this. This one is also going up, and this one is going down like this. So this is the overall structure of Beethoven's Fifth. So here is Howard Rourke laughs. Okay, here is the quarry, the lowest point of his life. Here is Gail Wynand at the top of his penthouse with a gun to his head. not really caring about his life. And finale is Rourke being at the top of the world, building that he himself has designed. Now let's look at the other points here. So this one starts with the laugh and it ends up with the celebration of Peter Keating. So I'm going to call it celeb because I think he's a celeb that actually captures his nature. The Quarry movement ends with Rourke saying to Elsewhere to he, but I don't think of you. The third movement ends up with Dominique throwing away the telegram. And the final movement starts with Monadnock Valley. So those are the main points. So what I'm doing, folks, is that if you're familiar with the book, keep track of all the thoughts you have. We're going to be talking about all of these. Okay. Now, thanks to Sherri, after my last presentation said, but what about Dominique? You know, she's the protagonist and you've not really talked adequately about her. So I'm adding, there is a reason for that. The point I want to make is that there is an outer structure, which is the structure in existence, which is what is shown here. But inside there is a spiritual structure or internal structure, internal struggles. And Dominique is all about that. So I'm putting points here, right in the middle, 4 points, which are the key points for Dominique. I'll tell you, I'm not going to keep you in suspense. I'm going to tell you about all 4 of them so you can start thinking about them. Because when we come to the main part, which is looking at the theme and seeing how it applies, you would have these at your background. In the first movement, it's the statue. Her throwing that statue down. She captures her nature perfectly. Part of the first movement, which sets up the theme. The second one is the temple, sort of temple. The third one, which is all about Winan, is obviously the marriage with Winan. And the finale here is her courtland. So her calling the reporters to the Monadnock Valley. Okay, so next, so this is, I've finished the outer structure. I've given you a little bit on what we are going to do with this inner development. Now comes the major part where I want to state the theme in a completely different way than it has been, that I've seen before. And here I have Louis Sullivan to thank for. Okay, I think form follows function is the theme, but I've never liked the sentence form follows function for multiple reasons. First, it starts with form. Form is the subject. That's not the right subject. If you had to say something, it has to be function because that is the driving force. It has to start with function. Second, follows is weak. So the way I formulate, I've always thought of it is function creates its own form. Function creates its own form. And because form has been overemphasized and for many other reasons, I'm dropping the form at the end. You can put it parenthetically. So you can say function creates its own. Okay. And I'm going to draw it for you. Okay. So I'm saying that function is this vertical line going from your I, the core of your being, to the highest potential that you see, the best possible, the highest possible. That aspiration in a human being is the function of a human being. Okay, so I'm going to call it, and then here is the world. Okay, so this is I. This is the highest possible. As you give me a second, I'm going to change one thing here. Just going to keep, let's do this. I, H, and the world. Okay. So function, I'm going to use different colors now. I'm going to use blue for function, and I'm going to emphasize it. Right. So this is the function, the blue. I'm going to call it F. Okay, this is the function. Next is creates. So what is creation? So creation is this right here, creates. What are you doing when you're creating? You're taking the highest conception of highest possible, and you're bringing it into reality. That's what creation is all about. So that is create. And what does it create? And this is the crucial part. What does it create? It creates something that really supports the function. That is its own. So imagine when Howard Roark is building a house for somebody. He's building a house. Let me go ahead and complete this one, and then let me talk. I want to talk so much that I don't know. Just want to make sure that people can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so function creates its own. Okay, so conceptualizing the highest possible. This is what thinking is about. So this is thinking. This is understanding. You're trying to grasp the nature of things. You grasp the highest possible conception you have. This is your action. This is what you're actually doing. Okay, and this is your emotion. Okay, so that it's basically supporting the function. I will just rename this. I will call it love. Okay, think, act, and love. Okay, that I see as the pattern. So that's what Howard Roark is doing. Okay, so next I want to apply this to the first movement. Beginning of the first movement, Howard Roark laughs. The beginning of the fourth movement, the Monadnock Valley, and then spend a lot of time in the middle of the second movement in the Stoic Temple, because that's where you can see it most clearly. Okay, so now I'm going to use this one. I think I'll make it a little bit thinner. And I'm going to, you know what, let me go ahead and store this one so I can bring it back anytime I want. Okay. Howard Rock laughs. Just a second here. This Howard Rock laughs. Now imagine the other thing that happens is very important. He laughs, and here is the nature. Here is the rock waiting for him. He's not doing anything at this point. This is this right here. Howard Rock laughs. The spirit is there fully. He's fully there. Spiritually, he's fully there. He's not started working yet. And this is the object which he's looking at. Now fast forward to this point, Monadnock Valley. He's now sitting down, looking at a valley where he has actually done this. He has used his highest conception to transform the world. And what do you see there? You see these houses, each of whom, look at how people describe their experience of living in Howard Rock's houses. They actually experience love of themselves, of saying, I have to rise up to this. So Howard Rock doesn't build houses, okay? Because house is a generic thing. It's like saying, he makes forms. He doesn't make forms. He makes his own forms. That own part is really the crucial thing. It's a certain kind of a thing which supports his spirit and the spirit of others. That's what is meant by own form, its own form. So function creates its own form. You can see that very clearly. You can see that in the figure of Howard Rock sitting down, looking at what he has done. You can see that in a person living in his house. That house is supporting the spirit of the person. He found people. Whatever he was doing, other people saw it. And they said, I want that. And they came. So it was like his spirit was like a beacon, which was made explicit in his work. So people could see the spirit through his work. They came looking for him. Remember that he was hired there to be the most unsuccessful of people, precisely for the reason who he was. And he screwed all those developers by actually being successful. He created something that people wanted to buy. Okay, so that is Monadnock Valley. Also, look at the boy on the bicycle. He doesn't know Howard Rock. He is still in this stage over here of trying to see, he's further, he's very much further down in that. He is not fully conceptualized what he wants to do with his life. What is the highest possible? He's struggling, okay? And here is the Monadnock Valley that comes in, giving him the courage to keep going up, to keep building his spirit, and to create things. Okay, so this is the example for this part. So this was 1 beginning and 4 beginning. Okay. Now let's take the best example of the illustration of the spirit. Please note that so far, Peter Keating has not come in, Ellsworth Toohey has not come in, Weinman has not come in. We are talking about Fountainhead. We're talking about the beginning of the Fountainhead and the end of Fountainhead. They have not come in yet. Okay, just noting that. We will come to them. All right, let me go ahead and take this. get a fresh diagram here. Now, let us talk about the distorted temple. And I'm going to take some time to talk about this, because this actually, the core of this, the human spirit, is captured in just 2 lines. That Storage says, one line that Storage says to Howard Roark, and one line that Howard Roark says back. You know, Storage says to him that you are religious in your own way. And Howard Roark is shocked to hear that. And he realizes that it is true. So let me go ahead and make sure that you can see it properly. Okay, it's not good. Let me make it larger. That will be the easiest way to see it. Okay. Now let's look at the distorted temple. Let's look at first just the structure of the temple. What is in the center? It is the statue of Dominique, of the eye rising skyward and finding itself. The highest possible is being that capability is within you. That's at the center of the temple. That is the human spirit. The temple is almost like a blessing on earth. And it lifts up the earth. The experience when you walk in, the structure itself is off the earth, at the same time lifting the earth. So it is these 2 movements over here. And this is something that Howard Roark has created. And I want to look at it in multiple ways. So first, I want to point out how Howard Roark, Mallory, Mike, and Dominique are when they are inside this temple during the building of it. They're like children. There is a genuine community in the temple. And that is created by this context. This is the common goal. They're all individuals. And they have a community because it is a place. Howard Roark has built a temple to a human spirit, And they feel that in the construction of it, and people feel that when they enter the temple. So there is genuine love between human beings as a result of this. That is what is meant by the, it is, you're creating a form which is the function's own. So function creates its own form and it supports functions like itself. Please note that all these 3 other individuals are very different from each other. Mike, Mallory, and Dominique. You will notice that the shape, if I were to draw them, if I wanted to rank them on the scale of 3 to 1, in terms of which one of these 3 is the strongest. So suppose I was to put Mallory here, Dominique, and Mike. Okay, and if I were to put these 3, so here is the function, here is the creation, and here is love. Clearly, Dominique is 3 on love. That is her main motive, love of the center, love of the human spirit, is her entire being. Mike is a creator. The height that he has is not as much as Mallory or Dominique, but he is amazing at transforming reality. Mallory is amazing at conceptualizing the highest possible, of grasping the highest possible. Next after that is his capacity to love. Next is this. So 3, 2, 1. If I wanted to divide, give 6 points and divide them into each. For Dominique, it is like this. For Mike, it is like this. So you can see that they are all different from each other. They are not the same. So all of these three things are needed for human beings, but they exist in different quantities with different people. So again, just bringing in the variation over there. All right. I think I've put enough down here. So let me go ahead and take this out. Let me see. Yes, let me take this out. All right. Now, let me go ahead and bring back the diagram. Now, so far you will notice, so we have finished the theme. So I've said what I wanted to say about the theme. And folks, please, I want your comments. I'm going to start with Rob, then Sherri, then Maritza, Rupali, Joia, Iris, and then anybody else who wants to comment on this, okay? So that's the theme. Now, let's look at the oppositions. They don't deserve that thick a line, so I'm going to make it thinner. All right, the first section is called Peter Keating. Where is Peter Keating in this? Peter Keating is here, flat, and he's moving in the opposite direction. This is Peter Keating. What is the most memorable line between Howard Rourke and each of these characters? With Peter Keating, it is, where is your eye? Where is the vertical? There is no vertical. Okay, so that's Peter Keating. What is he doing? He's focused only on forms which are there, and he's trying to position himself in that periphery. That's all he's trying to do. Next is Ellsworth Toohey. Ellsworth Toohey is the destroyer of spirits. Memorable line, I don't think of you. And the last is Gail Winan. That's the most complicated. Gail Winan, what is the most memorable line? You are not meant to be a second-hander. What does that mean? He has a genuine ability of having a spirit, but decided that that can be had by protecting yourself against the world. And actually by ruling the world, you win that. You sell all kinds of stuff to fools and collect their money and have a yacht where you go away from them, or have a gallery where you keep the art that reminds you of your spirit. So it is taking something, from the world and trying to hold on to the spirit from there. You will notice that both these are loops. Both these are spirals. There is a positive spiral that goes like this, that keeps building the positive, and there is a negative spiral that goes exactly in the opposite direction. And they all depend on each other. He drives Peter to be more Peter. Winan needs a bunch of Peter Keatings in order to sell them banner. And he's creating an ability that is allowing Ellsworth Toohey, to his one small little voice, to be amplified. And all of it is destructive. So that is the opposition. Okay, so let me get rid of it. We don't need that. You know what? I'll keep some part of it, maybe. I'll just keep that much. All right, so we're done with opposition. Let me see how we're doing on time. That's not bad. Okay, now the inner development. Howard Roark, you can see that Howard Roark remains Howard Roark. The spirit is there. What he intends to do is there throughout. It's just a question of he has to go through Peter Keating, Toohey, and Winan to get there, and which he does. The entire drama, inner drama, there is outer drama, of course. You know, the large, all the beginning and ends are the outer drama. The story of Howard Roark. But inner drama is all Dominique. There are other side things like Mallory, and the most notable second one, of course, is Gail Winan. But primarily it is Dominique. So let's look at Dominique. So now we're going to look at 1, 2, let me use this, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I think we're doing well on time, so I will be able to give myself the test. Because if this indeed is the theme, it should be able to answer this, the match between the team Dagny and team Dominique that has been going on. So I'll be quick. No, I shouldn't be quick. Let me go ahead and make the point about Dominique. So first here, she finds something which captures the spirit. She doesn't think that world deserves it and throws it down the shaft. She does the same thing to Howard Roark's buildings, tries to do. Yet, she agrees to do the Stoddard Temple. Now the Stoddard Temple, I'm going to take a little time here to do this. I think this is worth doing. The entire nature of this function, of the spiritual in human being, is being held by those two lines in Fountainhead. But many of the key psychological concepts depend on it. You need to be able to say I before you can say I love you. That's this. Pain that goes only up to a point. Pain is all what can happen here. Your core remains untouched. This vertical axis remains untouched. All of that is about spirit. Okay, but it's kind of dealt with implicitly. So let me take a minute to deal with it explicitly. I'm going to do it very quickly using 3 different religions. First is Tao Te Ching. Tao Te Ching calls this the Tao, the principle governing nature that is shaping the world. And the sage who is here, his focus is on understanding the Tao and in acting according to the Tao naturally. instead of getting focused like Peter Keating on concretes here, on what they call 10,000 things, and getting distracted by that. In Gita, this was interesting. I was talking to my friend Zach and he said, oh, I've started reading Fountainhead independently. He said to me, I started reading Fountainhead, and Rock's approach to work is just like Karma Yoga in Gita. And it is. So this over here, the way in which Gita works is that it starts with Jnana Yoga. So this is about the knowledge. So this is knowledge of eternal that you have in your core. You use the highest of knowledge to decide what you need to do, what you should be doing. And you do that. That is called Karma Yoga. And this love is called Bhakti Yoga to that. So that is about the Stoic temple and connection with spirit and matter. You know, human beings are a being of spirit and matter. Spirit is internal, matter is external. You're trying to make the matter imbued with spirit. You're trying to create functionated forms, and that supports your spirit and makes the world a better place, more spiritual place, more beautiful place, more good place. So that's the temple. Now, let's look at the temple as a part of the story. Elsewhere too, he gives the temple to Howard Rock so that he can destroy him, because he knew what Howard Rock is going to build. Dominique decides to do it because that is what she loves, regardless of anything else. When the temple is destroyed, elsewhere too, he uses the statue to get Winan to meet Dominique. Winan fires Dominique because of her defense of the temple. And that is the telegram which is destroyed when she realizes that Winan actually loves her. Okay, so that the temple runs through this entire part. Okay. Now the other parts, the good thing is that we have got amazing people who know all of this stuff. So I will just keep it to the temple. You know what the I invite anybody else who wants, any of the other panelists, to talk about the meaning of the marriage. Why is it that Dominique marries Winan? When Winan chooses, see, when Winan tries to defend Rourke, saying that I have all this power, I will defend you, and then decides to give up. And then Dominique realizes that is the spirit is not primary in him. At the same time, his greatness is that he realizes what he has done. He shuts down the shuts down the banner, takes all the money, and builds the Winan building, tallest building in the world, in the greatest city. And let me just take a minute to talk about the final scene, finale, because no symphony is complete without the finale. So you have Howard Rourke standing, just like he was standing here, he's standing here. So the spirit is still there. It is actually much stronger. He is standing on the top of the building, which he has created. So that is this. And the important thing is the loop completing is Mrs. Rourke, his own wife, coming up to meet with him. So that's the loop complete here. Okay, so that is my presentation. I'm going to keep the screen on, and I'm going to now ask for comments. You can you can take up to, panelists can take up to 15 minutes to comment on anything that they want to comment on, anywhere between 5 to 15 minutes. We'll start with Rob, Sherri, Maritza, Rupali, Joia, and Iris. Rob.
Okay, well, my first question is, you said we're going to have the Dagny versus Dominique, Team Dagny and Team Dominique here. Have we gotten to that yet? Or are you going to do it later?
What I'm going to do is that I'm going to hold that out as a bribe for you guys. Once you give me all your comments, then I'm going to give you that.
Okay, so I'm going to take some time absorbing some of this, but here's what I want to comment. I think you've got what I really like about this is I think it really breaks out what the key moments are in the plot. The key moments you have marked on this whole graph here. Those really strike me as being the actual inflection points. These are the key stopping points in the way that the plot structure works. I agree with the idea that Dominique's function there, and it really is crucial to, it's part of the case for Dominique in a way, is that without her there to be the one reacting and her changing reactions to things, her being the one to transform and progress throughout the novel doesn't have the impetus, doesn't have a real plot structure. So I like the fact that that those impetuses, the key moments come pretty much in the middle of each of these major sections. So that really shows you what's happening. But I also, what I found most interesting was the way you use this this triangle here of thinking, action, and love, and using that to show these are the three things that have to react and have a positive feedback or negative feedback with each other. And I like the way of breaking out the three characters, Dominique, Mike, and Mallory, as representing different aspects of that. And then the second-handed characters as representing the three aspects going on the other side. I think that's the part I'm gonna steal that completely, because
Rob, I came up with this entire presentation so you could steal the whole thing. You wanted to steal it, so I wanted to give you more things.
That explains why you have those as the three, Peter Keating, Ellsworth Toohey, and Gail Wynand. You have those as the three secondhand lives, so to speak. I mean, that was her original title, Secondhand Lives. Those are the three secondhand lives, and they're representing the three different aspects of the sort of the backward spiral of these relationships. So Toohey being the one who's trying to tear down the inner conception of the individual, the individual's inner conception of his potential. Keating is the one who's moving away from the individual potential and out to the world, and letting the world dictate everything about him. And then the Keatings as being the people from whom, and really the Keatings are the people from whom Wynand tries to draw his power and who are actually controlling him. That he's the one who's up there on H with the highest potential, but that potential is then he's letting it under the guise of thinking that he's going to rule them. He's letting that highest potential to control him. Now since we're in spoiler territory here, we're up to our neck in spoilers here. One of my favorite scenes in this novel is later on after Wynand basically gives in, knuckles under, and gives up his defensive work. He goes wandering the streets, and he ends up in Hell's Kitchen, and he realizes you never got out of here. He says you wanted to control things. He resented the fact that other people controlled everything. He wanted to control things. He says, but you never actually controlled anything. You just added yourself to the things that they controlled. Wow. And that's that hypotenuse of the triangle there. It's that the Peter Keatings, the world, is being put in control of his very great potential. and he thought it was the other way around, and that's his big mistake. So I really like that analysis because it explains why you have those three different characters as the antipodes in a way to or the foils, the comparisons. I wouldn't describe Winan as an antipode, but as a comparison against which we're contrasting work.
Next up is going to be Sherri. Sherri, what do you think?
Yeah, so I love having the visuals. This is really fantastic.
So I have to say though, you take Shrikant out of the science and technology field and in the literature, and he gives you graphs and charts and triangles.
Well, so there's a couple of, okay, so and like Rob said, I'm gonna need time to totally absorb this, but just the chart that you have here with the points on it and seeing the whole structure of the book this way with these dots, these nodes, is really important nodes of the book, is fascinating and really fantastic and powerful. I think it's hilarious, and I said this to Rob when you drew this. You have this triangle, I, H, and W, and you're talking about spirals, and I'm kicking Rob under the table going, but that's not a spiral, it's a triangle.
It's a triangular spiral.
It's a triangular spiral, yes, but maybe there's a way that you can get the spiral and the triangle to have the same geometry. I don't know.
Maybe it would be better if it were an equilateral triangle.
Maybe instead of
a right angle.
Yeah, maybe. But the thing that I would say is what I know we talked about the structure of Beethoven's the Fifth last time, but I'm feeling like I'm waiting. Where's the music? I wanted to hear the music. I expected to hear the music, and I expected.
You wanted me to go pam 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 ba 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 bam ba 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 like that.
That's the fourth movement, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I go hum the theme of each of the movements for us.
There you go.
help us get this clear in our mind.
Well, no, what I think I would really love is to see this discussion of Beethoven's Fifth, and then the joining of the comparison between the two. I know that we've talked about it privately.
I should have listened to this on the way over.
We were running late. Unless I had wanted to do that. But I know you and we have talked about the structure of Beethoven's Fifth before. So I know where you're going and what you're talking about, but I don't know that everybody else here does. So I think that would make this much more powerful. Yeah, I'm fascinated and loving this.
Excellent. Thank you, Sherri. Next up is Maritza.
So, I'm going to sound the same, similar note that Sherri and Rob say from this presentation. It's amazing. I love the visual. I really like the triangle. I think it's something that in some way or form we've probably thought of in our own and in a different way, but this is very succinct. I see that. I disagree a little bit with Rob in that I see the religion only because whenever I hear the word religion, I take out religion and I add in philosophy. And so if I look at this, and we operate from the, to me, it's almost an axiomatic concept that everyone needs a philosophy in life. So when Rourke is shocked to realize that, he is religious in his own way, it means you have a very strong sense of your own philosophy, even though it's not the philosophy that most would subscribe to. So I totally see that. I really like the parallels that you brought in for that, because it also shines a spotlight on the fact that, everyone should have a philosophy and it doesn't have to look like what everyone else is doing. If you're true to it and to yourself, then you're going to continue on your forward movement. So I really like that. From the and then the thinking, the love, and the action. That's just brilliant. I really, really like that. And, you know, Sherri, the way it's written, it's a spiral because look, it's like many triangles, one inside the other. So it looks like you're looking down. So, you know, it looks kind of spiral-like to me. It works. The movement, the arrows to me, I really like it because, you know, so the thing about, and I really, really appreciate that the people that are making this thinking, love, and action, they're the support characters. So work is actually the one who changes the least throughout. He's your steady beat, right? He's not your crescendo, really. Even though he has his highs and lows, he's not your big aha moment. That goes to Dominique. I really, you know, and conversely, if you look at Atlas Shrugged, the females of these stories, they're the ones who go through the biggest metamorphosis. By the end of the novel, they have to realize or discover that their entire premise for life is inaccurate, perhaps even incorrect. And so we see that in them as both of the novels kind of progress. And so, you know, I really like that you highlight the others outside of work in this in this diagram here for the concept of, you know, the highs and lows here. If we're looking at, you know, the Beethovens, I love seeing that you did, again, that you added in Dominique, because, you know, that was Sherri's question, what happened. And she's technically, she's not the heroine of the story, but she's pivotal. I really think it would be an entirely different novel because she's the one that I see with the most change. And, you know, something to note here too is that, you know, Ayn Rand always said that she doesn't write, she's not writing a naturalist novel. She's doing it from the romantic perspective, which is with a capital R. And so what she's given us here is these bigger than life characters. Because she's seeking to present the ideal. So it just makes sense that the characters that are undergoing a transformation are like, it's huge. And so I feel like it's okay if you find them off-putting because you're supposed to. And that's the whole point there. But you, in your diagram, you actually bring everyone down to more like human visual. You know, the way you present it here, we can see the human in Tui, you can see the human in Keating in a way that you don't always get from the book. So I really like that. And you know, I'm with Rob and Sherri. I need more processing. You have to ask us again next week when we've had a whole week to churn and process.
Absolutely,
more.
folks. All the panelists have, that next week, please give me more feedback. Give me your first impressions now, and then you can give me more impressions later on. And
those are my first impressions. Thank you.
Thank you, Maritza. Next up is Rupali. Rupali, go ahead. Rupali, you need to unmute. Oh, just a second. Wait a minute. I did not make you a co-host. Go ahead. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Shrikant. This is wonderful. As Sherri said, you know, I like to see things in a pictorial form. It is easy to understand, and the way you broke the entire plot into 4 parts with the comparison with Beethoven's Fifth. So I did listen to it before before this presentation, so I could kind of have that idea. But to Sherri's point, I do agree that it would be good to kind of see this and have the music actually played with it. So I like the 2 triangles. I think more than triangles or spirals, I look at them as cycles. So the first outer triangle, the larger one, I look at it as the cycle of harmony. So when the I is moving towards the highest potential, the potential in every human being, it, because of all the contemplation that goes with the self, about the self, leads to actions that are in harmony with the human spirit. And so the world that you create based on that harmony between yourself and your actions, the world that you create is pleasing, or is what it ought to be for the occupants, or in this case, or for anyone to live in, which leads to then more joy or more feeling of happiness. And so that is a contagious cycle. Okay, I'm happy, so I'm going to strive to be better. And I see this as a cycle which continues. And I really, really, really like the cycle of opposition. I think you did such a great job on identifying that I've always thought of contrasts in this book as a very powerful literary element that Ayn Rand uses. But these opposing cycles, because here is a cycle that's creating, and here is a cycle that's destroying. And you have just the opposites for each one of them. And you can see that Peter Keating, if towards the end, he goes to Rourke and says, I want to create. And Rourke says it's too late, because he doesn't even know his own vertical I and what the potential is. He's killed it all along the way, because yes, he has the skills to draft a beautiful drawing. He has the knowledge of architecture, of concrete or math or science that's required, but there's no flame inside him to create anything. And so if you're just going towards the world, but not without knowing who you are along the vertical, then it really doesn't help. So I really thought this was wonderful. Now, if you look at the characters, Rourke is in that complete harmonious state throughout the book, that he's stable. He knows, like right from the beginning, being kicked out of college does not affect him. He laughs and he says, okay, what next? Rolls up his sleeves, gets to Cameron's office and says, I want to work for you. So he has a direction, knows what he wants. Very rare, but is possible. And then based on that, even if there are obstacles along the way, because he knows his I very well, he is willing to be patient to take his actions. And so then when there is an opportunity, he can create his buildings. And then you see that people who occupy his buildings have this feeling, or like you mentioned about the temple, it's uplifting. And so the cycle continues for him, and he can be at the top at the end. Now, Dominique is very interesting because she's denying this harmony throughout the book, right? She is against this. She doesn't believe that this harmony can actually exist. And she's fearful because of that. And for her, Rourke's influence is to get aligned in this cycle and kind of give away, like, not be fearful, but have the courage to kind of say, okay, it is possible to create this harmony. One thing that when I first read the book, the reason this book appealed so much to me was because this was the first book that showed me that if there is a life that you want to create based on your own ideas and values, it is possible here and now on Earth. You don't need to have, an afterlife or be in heaven or anything like that. You can do it on earth. And I think Howard Roark shows that path. And if you look at Bhagavad Gita, I can only talk about Bhagavad Gita because I've not read the Bible or the Tao in depth at all. But if you look at Bhagavad Gita, it is, the thinking is Jnana Yoga, which is contemplating, using your sensory inputs to understand what is going on around you. What is the situation? Using your sensory inputs to become fully aware of the situation and know what is and what isn't. So that gives you the stability because you are able to contemplate. And you see this in Roark's character throughout the book. He is not out there for power. He's not out there for any personal gain other than doing his own work. That I want to get better at whatever I am. And then the Karma Yoga is based on the Jnana Yoga, where you are applying now with focus and concentration that one thing that you want to do. And so if you look at Roark's, the moments when he is working and how focused he is, or I have no time to play badminton when I am going to build your house. What do you mean? So that amount of focus and concentration that you need to do your job well, that's Karma Yoga. And when you believe in the human potential, that every person has this potential, you can see that love is automatically there. And then the Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga become harmonious. The activity that you create from that love for the human potential is uplifting. And it brings people together in the work that you do. So that's how I see this outer cycle. With the inner cycle, I just feel that's the cycle of destruction. And throughout the book, we see how this cycle always becomes an obstacle to the harmonious cycle. So perhaps these triangles could intersect, or I don't know, in your diagram, because they are not independent of each other. The ultimate is that the cycle of harmony is better for humanity. That's what it shows. So with people like Tuhi who destroy human aspiration, I really like the way you've shown the arrow going down from the potential to the down. So you're really destroying the aspiration. And when I work with children, I see this in the way adults speak to children. You can either make it or break it for a child, right? You can do the same for people who are with you. And Tuhi does it purposely to destroy that human spirit over and over with, Katie is a great example of that. And then you have Peter Keating, as I said, and then Winan, who feels that I can control people, and he understands the human spirit, but he's just going in the opposite direction. He feels that with power, he can control things. And, I see this with teachers when teachers say, I want you to do, they believe in the child's potential, but they're so fixed in their mindset that I want you to do the way I tell you. And the child rebels because that's not the human spirit. You need freedom. You need to have that capacity to create without obstacles. So these two cycles, really, I find them very fascinating. And your connection with the Bhagavad Gita was really well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Rupali. So next up is going to be Joia and Iris, and then I'm going to open it up for anybody who wants to comment. So go ahead and type ! If you would like to comment. Joia.
Thank you. I'm glad I get to go at the end of this because it gives me plenty of time to collect my thoughts and even prepare something to say. So I'm going to even reiterate what Rupali was saying and say that I agree. I think the identifications of these cycles was, for me, the most really important and insightful aspect of this whole presentation. And I hope for Sherri's sake that you make it more symmetrical so that it's more beautiful to Sherri's eyes. Because to me, this was really just insightful, even for the novel and even just for us as people, to, like, as a lesson that we can take away from this and apply to how we think about our own lives. And I really want to applaud you because I even see you even going further than Ayn Rand herself in identifying what was so important. And I think it really is sort of the dynamism of the spirals, of recognizing the way these components interact and have this kind of cause effect relation, and it grows on each other. And so I was even able to pull up Ayn Rand's own thought of how she placed out all the characters, and hers is just even so much more static as opposed to your insight. But I think this even kind of shows the power of the novel, that because she writes out the whole novel, there's so much more that we can glean from it. And so I just even want to applaud you for really pulling out this really great insight. But I will share even Ayn Rand's thoughts about how she created the characters, even so we can maybe make the comparison between, I think, what you did really brilliantly here and how she thought about it herself. So when Ayn Rand talked about how she kind of came up with whole characters, and I had kind of shared in an earlier presentation how it came first that she kind of met this person she was working with named Marcella, who was kind of a Peter Keating. And when she had kind of that person versus herself, that gave her Peter Keating versus Howard Roark. And she goes on and says, and the way I built out the rest of the characters, she says, the way I built it out for myself, in effect, this is the procedure of my thought, was that if we take the ideal man as the center, that is really the theme of the story. That's Roark. Then in relation to him, I show three other types in this way. Roark is the man who could be the ideal man and was. Wynand is the man who wasn't, but could have been. Keating was the man who wasn't and didn't know it. Toohey was the man who was not the ideal and knew it. That was the definition to myself as to why I take these four as the key figures. Now, it wasn't that I figured this out as a sort of syllogistic assignment, but that I first projected into my mind the variance of this issue of man against the others. The choice that Roark made. What else could a man do who really had independence and a great mind? What would happen to a Roark if he surrendered to others? That would give me Wynand. Who would be the arch opposite, an enemy of both Roark and Wynand? That gave me Toohey. Who is the average man that, in effect, rides on evil without fully knowing it? That would be Peter Keating. But I see even there how, Ayn Rand's own conception was, as I see this more static presentation, where I love how yours really reflects the dynamism of and gives us this lesson, as Rupali is pointing out, that, we have to be careful to not fall into this cycle the bad way, because it can just, lead to more and more evil. And we want to keep acting, because every step that we take that's in the positive cycle leads to greater and greater beneficial results in that way. So I really love that part of it. I did want to say a couple things about Dominique as well. And I even wanted to just maybe push back on this idea of Dominique as the protagonist, because I don't see that as being quite accurate, although I definitely see the sentiment behind it. But technically, the protagonist is the character that drives the action of the story, which doesn't necessarily mean that the protagonist is on the journey of knowledge, even though in most of our modern novels, I think that's something that we expect and look for. And personally, I even think that that's a great thing that I think as audiences, we come to look for our protagonists to be characters who have some kind of inner development as part of the journey they go on in a story. But technically speaking, just, what a protagonist technically is doesn't necessarily have to have an inner development. And of course, we can think of all sorts of stories throughout history where, there definitely has to be a transformation that's kind of critical to what a story is. But a protagonist doesn't necessarily have to go on an inner journey. And personally speaking, it's even one of the ways where I would say I personally, differ myself from Ayn Rand's view, because for her, she definitely had the view that the main character, Howard Roark, was this ideal. And part of her vision of the ideal was that he was supposed to be this kind of monolith from the beginning. And this is true also. I'm not going to do spoilers of Atlas Shrugged, but if you read that book, you would find something very similar there, that this was her vision of what the ideal was, that the ideal man was this monolith who wouldn't change. So this is the way I would say I'm on both Team Dagny and Team Dominique, because in both of these stories, it really is the women that she gives those characters the real internal journey. They're the ones who actually have some kind of internal conflict, and they're the ones who go on a journey that involves some kind of learning. And I would say to my own worldview, I believe that is the case. I think that's why we're even all here in 52 Living Ideas, because we all see that life is this constant journey of learning and growing and the inner development. So in this case, I will say I'm on both Team Dagny and Dominique, and all for going on the inner journey, but it doesn't quite make the character the protagonist. And it certainly doesn't in Ayn Rand's view. And I think we even see that in this book, that Howard Roark definitely is the character who is making the choices that drive the action of the novel forward, even though he's not going to go on an internal journey. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was just to pick up on something Rob brought up. He brought up this quote that is one of my personal favorite quotes in this book too. He made the reference to a character who talks about God who is alone there to see the highest possible, and that actually comes from Henry Cameron. When Henry Cameron finally sees that Roark had gotten that first commission with the Heller House, and this is just even one of my favorite passages. So I just wanted to read this, and I think it even just ties perfectly into your presentation here, Shrikant, and what you kind of talked about, the way in which Howard Roark really is religious. So this is what Cameron says when he sees, that Howard Roark got the commission. It doesn't say much, only Howard Roark architect, but it's like those mottos men carved over the entrance of a castle and died for. It's a challenge in the face of something so vast and so dark that all the pain on earth, and do you know how much suffering there is on earth? All the pain comes from that thing you are going to face. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it should be unleashed against you. I know only that it will be. And I know that if you carry these words through to the end, it will be a victory, Howard, not just for you, but for something that should win, that moves the world and never wins acknowledgement. It will vindicate so many who have fallen before you, who have suffered as you will suffer. May God bless you, or whoever it is that is alone to see the best, the highest possible to human hearts. You're on your way into hell, Howard. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate that, Joia. Next up is going to be Iris, Joe, and Zach. Iris, what did you think?
Okay, I found this very interesting. I also enjoyed all the conversations. I right after I discovered objectivism in the 1950s, 57, I discovered the Tao, and I was amazed at the parallels that I haven't read very much since then. I have to go back and study some more, but it's very interesting. I still have to drag myself through reading about Wynand. I care so little about power. It's really hard for me to even read that part, but I will power through again. That's it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Iris. Next up is Joe, followed by Zach. If anybody else wants to comment on the presentation, they're welcome to do that. Go ahead and type exclamation mark. Joe.
Yeah, I like how you've taken this diagram and actually made it real and putting it into a story format. So that's like, it's very consumable. For me, an interesting revelation was when Rob was adding his comments and speaking about this idea that how it differs from Christianity, and maybe he didn't see that connection, but what I do see is the connection between the Gita, as Rupali had referred to, and this diagram specifically, because you start to look at the internal self, you start to see God within yourself and God within everyone else. So when you're starting to go through that process, that you're basically going through you're trying to get to your Atman and your Bhakti Yoga, where you're going through, and where you are in that process essentially allows you get to enlightenment. And that's what essentially what we're trying to get to, is a form of enlightened self. Because once you become an enlightened self, then you can start to love the rest of the world. And that's where you start to able to, and this gets very close. This is very closely aligned with I see as Louis Sullivan's idea of the inverted self, which would be the negative aspect of that. So that the idea that once you understand yourself and your I am, then you can get in and reach out to the rest of the world and create something that is of substance for the rest of the world. There's the interesting thing with, I really like what you did with the Beethoven. We went through this last week, and I thought that this was really interesting. And I'm trying to see if that maps into maybe even a story format of how Aristotle approached storytelling, with, you know, the idea of the incentive, the complication, and the unraveling. And you can kind of see that here. I haven't made it one-to-one yet, been able to make that link, but there is some crossover there between the way Aristotle's storytelling, and I have a diagram that I could actually send to you at some point. But that this is really, I mean, I think that this is interesting. And again, I think it really does highlight some of the similarities that we've talked about with the Tao in the Bhagavad Gita, but that what Rob mentioned is the external God, this higher thing that you can never achieve. That's a very significant point when you're talking about evaluating how this model actually would work within Ayn Rand's framework, because it's completely unattainable. And what she's saying is it is attainable for, you know, its self-actualization is possible. But anyway, that was the number one difference. But I think it's a very interesting way. And I think, again, the way you draw your circle shows you how inverted you are as well. So that, you know, how you would draw the circle for, say, Peter Keating or Gail Weinert or anybody. It could also, that shows you kind of where you are in your process of enlightenment. Anyway, those are my comments.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Joe. And I really like the idea of the inverted self, because that inner circle is simply the inverted self. You're just doing, they're doing exactly, that circle is doing exactly opposite of somebody who takes function as the primary. Wonderful. Next up is going to be Zach. Zach, what did you think?
I loved it. It was really great. I got to see a little bit of the sneak peek, but it's really, I love how visual it is. I'm definitely a visual person, so it helps. I love kind of seeing the plot, you know, with all these markers. That really helps. And then the triangles as well. And so the way I'm kind of understanding the triangles, she talks a lot in the novel about, she kind of draws a dichotomy between creators and parasites. So the creator is focused on conquering nature. The parasite is focused on conquering man. The way I understand this outer triangle is the creator. This inner triangle is the parasite, or the opposition. And while you were doing that, I kind of thought of maybe an example to kind of ground it, because it's a little abstract. So I was trying to think, okay, how would this apply? And the example I thought of was, all right, let's take like a hunter-gatherer tribe. All right, go way back in time before something like a projectile was thought of.
Can I give you an example? Because it's go ahead.
Can I
please,
continue? Because I'm
go ahead.
Going somewhere with this.
Go ahead.
But
A lot of us make those mistakes when we're young, you know, liking the wrong guy, liking the wrong girl. You know, we
Go ahead.
So all right. So if you take like a tribe, all right, and they're hungry, they want food. we'll say this is before projectiles have been invented. We have the creator who is thinking, all right, there's a problem I see in the world, which is there's this antelope over there that I can't hunt. He thinks up and invents, the first projectile, goes out, kills the antelope, brings it back to the tribe. So his whole focus is on nature, conquering nature. He brings this antelope back to the tribe, and several people in the tribe who maybe fall in the category of parasite, their whole conception is not based on how can we go out and conquer more nature. It's like, how can I get the best cut of this meat that this other person brought back? So I think Rourke is based on, Rourke would be the hunter in this analogy. And, somebody like Peter Keating would, or even like Rob pointed out, what's the guy, Gail Wynand? Gail Wynand is even a parasite. He's just maybe the powerful, successful person in the tribe who manages to finagle his way and conquer and like get the most of the meat. But still, I think the orientation is the parasite is focused on how can we get the most of this piece of meat, and the hunter is just concerned with conquering nature. And I think it also dictates what your ethics are going to be, because if you are somebody who is reliant upon somebody else, basically you're Peter Keating, who your ethic just changes to whatever you think will help you get ahead from, or help you get more from other people. Whereas Rourke, he doesn't need for people to like him because he's not dependent on the tribe. He's going out and hunting his own antelope. So yeah, I don't know, maybe that analogy makes sense, maybe it doesn't, but I guess that's how I was thinking about it in this, and the way you drew it was like, yeah, the inner triangle can only exist if there's an outer triangle. And the way I was kind of looking at it, like the parasites can only exist if the creator has brought back an antelope or has created that new technology.
Zach, that's fantastic. Fantastic. Your example was much better than what I was thinking of. Go ahead.
I would still love to hear yours. I just was trying to get it out before I forgot.
It was great. It was great. And go ahead. Do you want to say more?
No, I guess I really liked Rob's comment, because I, when reading this, didn't really know where to put Gail Wynand. But as he pointed out, Wynand successfully, I don't know, I guess in this analogy, was the chief of the tribe who just got all of the meat and everything. But in his way, he's still dependent on others because he's not really producing anything. So, yeah, and I guess the one other maybe way you can look at this as well is, I think, like, if you are dependent on somebody else for money or income, like I can speak personally. I know for some of my young adult life, my parents were still helping paying some of my rent. For them, it was like, it's not a big deal, like whatever. But what I realized was, until I no longer was dependent on them for anything, there was still going to be a part of my psyche or personality that would be trying to appease them. So I think the way that this is set up is that everybody in this novel who is dependent on somebody else, their whole ethic just changes with the wind based on however they can get ahead. Whereas Rourke, the reason that Rourke doesn't care about Tui, where you say, whatever you think about me doesn't concern me, is because he's out looking for the antelope. He doesn't need to, it doesn't really matter what Tui thinks in Rourke's estimation, at least.
Thank you, Zach. That's fantastic. Next up is Evanique, followed by Laura. Evanique.
What I was thinking of when Zach was talking about the parasite and he was saying Gail White, and I was also thinking of Ellsworth Toohey. And I think the part that made me think that he is the parasite is when he talks about controlling people's souls or getting people's souls or something like that. And so I think he's a parasite in terms of he gets power from controlling people's lives. Like he's a parasite in that he's sucking other people's souls and pretending like he actually cares for these people. And I think Ellsworth Toohey, I would love to see that more explored, because I think he is an interesting character where I don't know if I like him or not yet, or if he is to be liked or not liked. But that's the part I wanted to add. I think he is very much a parasite as well, just in a different way than Gail Wyatt.
Wonderful. Excellent point. I don't want to spoil too many things for you, but just want to note that, no, I shouldn't spoil, even say this. Maybe you've come up to this point. Yeah. You realize that Mallory, who was focused on the vertical, tried to kill Toohey because he is exactly doing the exact opposite. He's trying to destroy human spirit. So he's a parasite at the deepest level. Comparatively, Winan is a small time operator. He's like Ellsworth Toohey is doing that at the most fundamental level possible, because function is primary. Function, it starts with function. Anybody who is trying to kill the function itself is the deepest killer. Laura, did you get to see my presentation? Laura, you need to unmute.
It's I got to hear your presentation.
Okay, go ahead.
Without I just want to say a few things about
Laura, there is background sound.
I can't figure out how to get rid of it.
I can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Okay.
If you can figure out how to shut down the audio.
I'm sorry, I'm not keeping up with the group this week.
Okay. All right. Okay, that's fine. I can't hear you, Laura. Rohit next.
Sorry, I was on mute. I was thinking that in this there is inner development. First of all, this representation is bang on, and I think there is inner development in Howard Roark as well, because if you look at it, when he's laughing, he has a very strong eye, and he has to move towards the edge. But if you look at the top on the right hand side, when he reaches the top, he's reached his top not only in his profession, but also in understanding who he is. This is after his speech in the courthouse, where he's actually articulating what is the ideal, right? And before that, he has not, or there are several conversations where he says, I don't know why this is happening, or I don't know why they behave this way. So he's kind of moving in that direction. So the thinking is moving up. His actions are getting better after working with Cameron. So if you look at the first part of it, when he starts working with Cameron, his actions are actually getting better, and he's able to realize his ideas much better. And then when you look at how he creates friendships with Mike and Mallory, you see his love is also improving. So we feel that he's an ideal person throughout who has nothing to develop, but in reality, the book actually, Howard Roark develops quite a lot in the book itself. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Fantastic point, Rohit. Absolutely agree. All right, folks. So fantastic comments. So let me go ahead and give you the last piece, which was on Dagny and Dominique. Zach, are you there? Zach?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to do spoilers now.
Oh,
so can you go ahead? Yeah, cut out your sound. I'm going to do spoilers, and I will wave to you once I'm done. Rob wants to say something. Wait a minute. Go ahead, Rob.
No, I was just approving of him taking out the.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. All right.
We'll wave, tell him to get back on.
Okay, all right. So we'll attract his attention whenever I'm done. Okay, all right. So there is this thing that we've been doing on Team Dominique and Team Dagny, and so I want to address that. So firstly, and this is a test of my diagram actually, okay? Because if I can explain this, it actually adds a lot more. So first thing to understand, and folks, I'm going to be doing lots of spoilers on Atlas, okay? But only for about less than 5 minutes. So if you have not read Atlas, please do what Zach did, remove your headphones. We will all wave to you. When you see everybody waving to you from Zoom, you can come back, all right? Okay, all right, so now spoilers begin. Okay, so first thing to understand with Atlas versus Fountainhead is that the world is different. This is the world as I portrayed. What the world in Atlas is that the two he's have won. Two he's have won. It's a different problem. So it's basically, this is what has happened. And they have won, and they are rapidly driving down, killing everything, destroying physical, destroying the world, destroying the highest possible, destroying individuals. That's what is going on in Atlas. Now, the question is, so first point I want to make is, before we go to Atlas, you know, if you want to move Dagny into Fountainhead, you have to map Dagny into a character. And if you wanted to map Dagny into one character, who would it be? It has to be Howard Rourke. So it's really the competition is between Team Dominique and Team Howard Rourke. That's what the competition is, okay? Now, so that actually makes it very simple. So it's just Howard Rourke, and you see that they are on the same team, basically, and they are related in a certain way. And so it just, that resolves the competition directly. But I want to do more than that. I want to say, if you want to take some character, so we said, okay, if you want to move Dagny into this, it would be Howard Rourke. If you want to move Howard Rourke into Atlas, let's do the same thing. Let's move him as Dagny, okay? Because he's doing exactly the same thing that Dagny would be doing. Okay, he would be doing exactly the same thing, okay? Now, let's look at the triangles, okay? If you look at the three men that Dagny loves, Francisco, Reardon, and Galt, who are they? And what do they do? And what do they do relative to each other? The human spirit is captured by Francisco best, of simply the joy of living and saying that I will create. That is there what she encounters first. Hank Reardon has ability to transform. So he has the C, he's the man of action. And what is it that John Galt does? John Galt restores world to its rightful owners. John Galt, Ragnar, and Francisco together. So they are basically doing this. So John Galt is doing this, Hank Reardon is doing this, and Francisco is doing this. So in that sense, though the external world is lost, actually the internal world in Atlas is far richer. where Dagny, instead of going through, dealing with Peter Keating, Toohey, and Winan, Dagny is dealing with Francisco, the promise of Francisco, the actual achievement and tragic achievement of Reardon, and then restoration of the primacy of the creative spiral by restoring the world to its rightful owners, which is the function, which is what God does. So that's how Dagny maps into Fountainhead, and Howard Rourke maps into Atlas. Any thoughts? Go ahead and type exclamation. Go ahead, Rob.
What's up? I'm muted. Okay.
There you go.
Okay, so here's the thing I find it just jumped out at me from this, which I find interesting, is that Dagny's world in Atlas Shrugged is one where the Tuohys have won and they control everything. And yet it's a world with a whole lot more Howard Rourke's in it.
Hmm.
So, all her relationships are with Howard Rourke types, are with first-handers. Whereas the odd thing about Dominique Franken is she's in a world where the Tuohys haven't won yet, and they don't control everything. But there's a lot fewer Howard Rourkes for her to choose from, right? So she has all these relationships with non-Howard, with second-hander, various variations on second-handers. And so and that's the thing I think is interesting, is that in Atlas Shrugged, you have much more the sense of a whole universe of, did he try to put his headphones back on?
Yeah, he put them in and then pulled them right back out.
Sorry. So in Atlas Shrugged, there's much more of a sense of a whole universe of creators and first-handers, this whole population of Galt's Gulch. So this is why Zach can't have his headphones in. This whole population of Galt's Gulch, full of these guys who are like Howard Rourke, who are creators and first-hand achievers. Whereas in the Fountainhead, there's basically this Howard Rourke. He has a few friends, but it's much more a sense of a small, beleaguered group, and nobody as pure and powerful as Rourke is. And that's what I think is something interesting that she's clearly doing somewhat deliberately, because one thing I've been wanting to mention for a while is there's a point later on in the where I think Dominique calls up Winan while he's doing this crusade at the paper, working, and he has to be working around the clock because there's a strike, and he's crusading in favor of Howard Rourke. And Dominique calls him up to remind him, Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto is going to be on the radio. You should, I know how much you love it. You should listen to it. And one thing that struck me is the assassination is taking place in like 1937, 1938. Mm-hmm. At the time, Rachmaninoff himself was living in New York.
Probably playing.
He was playing as a concert pianist. He probably would have, a performance on the radio in New York City of his second piano concerto probably would have had Rachmaninoff himself performing it. I actually have a CD of his own performances of these things. And so, and furthermore, Rachmaninoff hadn't even written a few of his best pieces, like the Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini was, I think, written about the same time the Fountainhead was published. So, this is something that there was this tremendous amount of creative achievement going on in the world. And, Rourke, there was not just one great good modernist, Rourke, there were multiple good modernists. So that's the sort of odd irony of these things, is that the real world of the Fountainhead actually had a lot more Rourke types going around, whereas but from Dominique's perspective, he seems rare. And in the part of the thing about Dagny is that she's in a world that is, in some ways, things are going much worse, but the first-handed men are less rare, at least from the perspective of the novel.
Excellent point. I've always thought about how Ayn Rand progressed from Fountainhead to Atlas. And she progressed in two directions. One is the understanding of the outer world, of how things work in the external world. And secondly, also inward. She made tremendous strides inward. So what we have is, I fully agree with everything that you're saying. You're saying that, so what you have is that the conflict in the in Fountainhead is largely internal. It is the internal conflict with outside relatively, I mean, yeah, there's conflict everywhere because of the nature of a novel, but the primary conflict is internal in Fountainhead, whereas primary conflict in Atlas is external, because basically you have all these, great characters. Go ahead. All right, next up is going to be Joe, Joia, and Rupali. Joe.
Yeah, actually, it's an interesting thing how essentially that what happens when you crush the idea of the self altogether. So that's kind of what we're talking about in Atlas Shrugged. And I just thought about what that actually then creates. And I kind of think of, in a way, something like Marshall McLuhan's Tetrad a little bit.
That's too much.
Oh, too far off? All
Go
right.
ahead, go ahead.
All right. No, okay. I was just going to say, because what happens is people start to retrieve something. So there's a retrieval of something, and that retrieval is of self. So that there's, once that it goes too far one way, and this is true of any kind of system, whenever you kind of systemics, you kind of see some huge systemic shift, you start to see people essentially that you're going to create more works in a system that kind of makes it where there aren't none allowed. The idea of self overall has been suppressed. So it's interesting to see that, how that kind of plays into one another. That's just the thought that I had when I was thinking about the two, if you're comparing the two, as to why there's only one Howard Rourke in the Fountainhead. Anyway, that's just.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Joia, Rupali, and Maritza. Joia.
Yeah, I just wanted to continue on the same idea, and I do have more spoilers. I don't know if Zach put his headphones back in.
Zach has left, so you can spoil away.
I've made an argument for a long time that I think The Fountainhead really is her most malevolent universe book of all her novels, which is really interesting when you think about how We the Living is set in a communist dictatorship, and Anthem is set in this dystopian future where they've lost the word I, and then Atlas Shrugged is set in this world that's in crumble and decay. But I don't think it's even ironic that the most malevolent universe, like the most characters who are on a malevolent universe premise, come from the Fountainhead, between Dominique and Wynand and Mallory. And to Rob's exact point, that the work as the first-hander is presented as so rare in this universe, that there are like no other works, and that Dominique would look around and just find it impossible that a work could succeed. And this is a world where everybody is reading the Banner and agreeing with Ellsworth Toohey. And so yeah, just that it is a very different universe from her other books. And I've always, I don't know if maybe anybody else knows, I've always even been curious why that might be. I was even curious if maybe it had something to do with, what happened to Ayn Rand, coming from Russia and having this vision of what America, could and ought to be. And then, coming to America essentially in the middle of the Red Decade, and, finding that there were no, really outspoken philosophical defenders of individualism. And to your point, Shrikant, that she obviously goes through a progression between the Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, but I'd even just be curious if people had some other thoughts about maybe why this book is so bitter. That's the way I always think of it. It's such a bitter view of the world and of people, as opposed to all her other books.
Thank you. Next up is Rupali, followed by Maritza. Rupali.
Hi, Shrikant. Thanks. I agree with you that the two worlds are very different in Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. And when I read The Fountainhead, I read that before reading Atlas Shrugged, so I thought it was a world of how to create. And in Atlas Shrugged, it shows that destruction is sometimes necessary to create a new world again. And it brings me, this is out there, but Shiva is a character in the Indian mythology that destroys to create something new again. So that just, I feel where the creators leave the world and then destroy what exists so that they can renew again, is what's shown in Atlas Shrugged. And in terms of Dominique and Dagny, they're both strong women, both independent, career-oriented women. But then Dominique goes from transforming from being fearful to then accepting and believing in the human potential. And Dagny starts out at that point. And once, much like Rourke, she is doing all the actions and then withdraws from the world towards the end of the book. So I just see those two characters in that manner. Both women defy conventions. So for me particularly, I admire both characters. And the thing only about Dominique is the fact that she showed me the path. Her character showed me the path to kind of say, it's okay not to conform and to be able to believe and be able to transform. So that's my take. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up is Maritza.
I just want to, I'm actually going to be tagging along with some of what Polly just said, because I did want to point out that it's important to note that at the time in which both of these novels was written, these characters are extremely strong, independent, powerful women, which was not as common back then as we are used to seeing more now in fiction. So, I'm not a huge fan of either or, because I think that there's merit to both. But I say that, and then I followed it by saying that, and yet I see they are opposing characters. One is operating in reverse from the other one, which is, it's again something we probably just mentioned. The idea here, it's like, I love the way, I hadn't thought of it as creation versus destruction. I love that. But I was thinking, you have to, it's the old holding tightly versus letting go, but like Polly's way of saying it better. Between the give and take between these two characters is that what they're doing is, I think that Ayn Rand, when she presents us with Dagny, she's trying to show a different view of what would be somebody who's holding tight to ideals. So Rohit had talked about how we do see growth in Howard Rourke, but I think what we're seeing in Howard Rourke is it's growth of him as a person. I mean, even we live in reality, right? So even if we are striving for our ideal and we remain true, there's going to be a movement within ourselves as we grow and change. Because if you're on that forward moving path, you're going to have to change. When I view Rourke as unchanged, I view his center, his ideal, inner core principles as unchanged. Even though, with time and maturity and experience, he grows and it, becomes just more robust. The enticing thing to me for Dominique and Dagny has always been that it's almost like a metamorphosis. That's the word that comes to mind for both of them, is that it's so much easier to place yourself in their shoes, because to me, they always struck a more human note. I see the struggle from day one. Whether or not you're a fan of Dominique or Dagny, you can see and you walk with them throughout the entirety of each novel as they're trying to reconcile the state of their world with their own internal moral compass. And they want to find a way to live without violating that. And so for Dominique, we see this absolute rejection of everything, because she feels that the only way to remain true is to not let anything touch her. And as we've learned here is that, it's impossible to walk through life without anything touching you. But she has to learn that. And we walk through the novel with her seeing that. And Dagny is the other way. Dagny is just like, I don't care that it's a, square peg, round hole. I'm just going to keep pounding and pounding, and I'm going to shave the sides, and I'm going to make it fit, damn it. And that's what you see for Dagny. And you have to admire that spirit. She has a belief that's so solid that her core value is so strong that she is going to find a way to impose it upon everyone around her. And we see them, and it's a struggle, and it's almost heartbreaking, honestly, when you view that at the very end, they have to let that go. I mean, but then you see the butterfly that comes out, right? So it ends up being a good story, a happy ending for both of them. But it's a very human struggle, whereas the ideal male that's presented in each of the stories, they don't have that internal struggle. And I think that's purposefully done. I think it's done to give us the contrast of, because I just want to remind folks again, she's not writing. She wasn't trying for a realist style. She was going for this romantic with a capital R style. And that creates bigger than reality people and characters. And so that's why these two characters in each novel, they're the growth, they're the arc, as it were. To me, I find them to be the arc of each story. They're vital. If you take out either of them, I don't think you get the same story. You can't. So Rourke shines because of how we see that Dominique struggles. She comes back to him and he says some statements to her that are pivotal in the moral statement that Ayn Rand is saying in her fiction. And I just don't think we could get it without this character. So I think it's a matter of, they're both vital. I don't know that I would be able to choose just one if I had to. Thanks, Rika.
Thanks, Maritza. Next up is Sherri, followed by Joia. Sherri.
I don't think I've actually weighed in. Rob has been the one weighing in on the Team Dominique, Team Dagny. And I don't think I've actually weighed in. And I thought this would be an interesting way to think about what we all discussed in reading the Romantic Manifesto, about how with a work of art, there is what the creator, what the artist had as an intention, which may be completely opposite of a viewer or reader, in this case's reaction to the work. And I find it fascinating that of all the characters in both of these books, we've all reacted enough to put ourselves on a team. And it is these two characters, that is what her work of art is bringing us about, that we're having this huge Saturday afternoon discussion over which team we're on, and why. And I think it's fascinating for us to all think about, because for example, Rupali gave us her sense of life reaction to Dominique when she first read it. Maritza, same thing. We've all kind of touched around what that is. And so I thought I'd share mine. My reaction is probably a lot like a lot of people's first reaction is, I just don't get her. For me, it was a deep, I love her strength. I love her integrity. That part I really responded to. But this sense of needing to destroy the good, it was such a visceral reaction for me that I almost had to put up walls to read her because that was such an opposite reaction from my sense of life that I couldn't go there because of that.
But she's a Dagny, so
Thank you. Next up is Joia, followed by Dominique. Joia.
And I guess that explains maybe why Rob married her, because in that sense, Sherri is still Team Dagny. I even wanted to pick up on something Maritza was talking about, and maybe even just flesh out kind of what I was suggesting before when I was suggesting that work doesn't really have much of an inner development. And I didn't want to suggest that work doesn't change at all, but I really wanted to go back to an idea that I think Ayn Rand expresses most beautifully in the introduction of this book. That I brought up in one of our earlier discussions, where when people asked her how she'd changed, this was 25 years after the Fountainhead when she wrote the introduction. And she had this line where she said, "I am the same only more so. And that to me, I think is such an important line that even describes Ayn Rand's ideal, her vision of what the ideal is, and something that she tried to give to her characters. And I think that is exactly what we see with Howard Rourke. It's not that he doesn't change, he obviously gets older. And it's interesting that Howard Rourke learns so much about himself. So one of the biggest perhaps changes, I guess you could say we see, is at the very beginning of the novel, he has this, he realizes there's something different between himself and the dean. And he's got this question about the principle behind the dean. And I know we haven't gotten there yet, and maybe there's nobody here for spoilers, but we're going to get to a conclusion where Rourke is going to learn to answer what is the principle behind the dean. And that's going to give him clarity and understanding about himself and, who he is in comparison to the world. And we see that Rourke even gets more and more insight about who he is. We even saw that in these chapters we've been reading when Stoddard says that line that people have been quoting about when Stoddard says, Rourke, you really are a religious man. I can see that in your buildings. And that Rourke had never realized that about himself. And that part of even why he takes the commission is because he got this great insight because of what Stoddard says. So it's not that Rourke doesn't change at all, but clearly what this is it's just, you could maybe call it like onion layers of realization of who Rourke is. Rourke is still the same first-hander. He's the same, only more so, which I think, it was very intentional on Ayn Rand's part about what the ideal is. And then maybe we could disagree about whether or not that should be the ideal. And maybe that would be where I would maybe want to have a little bit of a disagreement with her. It's one of the things I'll say that's frustrated me about, her books, where we never even see how a Rourke becomes a Rourke. He just emerges on the scene, already as this kind of ideal. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, I thanks for bringing up that, I'm the same, only more so, because that's actually a description of the spiral. See, that triangle is a spiral. So every time you're going through it, you're the same in the sense that the shape is the same. You're going through the same process, but in the process, you're becoming closer to the deepest part of you. Your conception of what is highest possible keeps increasing. Your ability to transform the world keeps increasing, and your ability to love and create love keeps increasing. So it's the same and different at the same time. Next up is Evanique.
Yeah, I just wanted to, when Sherri was like she didn't get why Dominique wants to destroy, I think I get that. I think I get that because, and I think it's particular, I'll use her work as an example of why she wants to destroy him, because he controls her. And Dominique is so independent that she really doesn't want anyone or anything to control her. So when something good comes, it makes her vulnerable, right? In this sense. And so in order for her not to be vulnerable, she has to destroy it. It just has to happen. She can't be vulnerable. She can't have anything controlling her. In a sense, it's her need to control the situation to her advantage. And when she can't do it, her best thing to do is to destroy it. Even look at her and her father, Franken, right? I don't see why she hates him so much in the beginning. And then I saw it because she can't have anybody or anything controlling her, including her dad. And love has this thing where if you love, in true love fashion, you are vulnerable. And you, in a sense, have to give up control of what the other person is going to do. And so Dominique, I think and I haven't gotten to the end of the book yet, but Dominique, at the point where I'm at, is not ready to do that yet. She's just not. And so she has to destroy everything that's good because it makes her vulnerable, makes her weak in her own eyes. And so I hope by the end I think from hearing all the spoilers, it sounds like she does, in the end realizes that's not the way to be. But right now, I think the sense of that she wants to destroy is because she doesn't want to feel love. She doesn't want to feel desire. She doesn't want to feel all the things that make her vulnerable and make her feel out of control, because she has this false sense that she can control everything. So that was my thought.
Thank you. Thank you, Dominique. All right. Does anybody else have anything more they would like to add? I know Sherri has a movie recommendation. I don't know what movies are, but we'll find out. Sherri,
It's
what's the
Rob.
movie?
It's actually Rob.
Yeah.
Okay, Rob, go ahead.
I have more things to add, but I think they'll fit.
No,
in with-
please go ahead and add.
fit in with some of the things we're doing in the upcoming one. So I'll save them for talking
No,
about.
don't save them. It's not a good idea. There is a big Sanskrit
You might
thing.
lose the note.
It's called Shubhasya Shigaram. Everything that is good is most auspicious when it is done immediately.
Okay. Well, okay, I'm gonna through two short things and then the movie recommendation. So the one is of this idea of Howard Rourke's character development. And so you mentioned it's a principle behind the dean, and that I think it really does begin with the principle behind the dean, because when he first uses that phrase, he says there's something important, I should think about that, and then he kind of loses his train of thought. Well, the sun is shining really beautifully on these stones.
He notices
and
the stone.
here's what this should really look like. He's so focused on reality and on what he can create that he can't bring himself to focus much on other people. And there's a couple of, I'm going to dig these up in the future, but there's a couple other little passages throughout the book later on where he says, there's something there about this. I need to understand this. And then, but he couldn't focus on it. But then he gets distracted by reality and can't spend much time focusing on
Buildings
other
and
people.
materials.
Right. So I think one of the things that happens is over time, especially as he builds more connections, one of the things that happens is he builds more connections with other people. And I think the Mallory scene, the scene where he meets Stephen Mallory, where is one where he really, it's one where he's being compassionate in a way and forming this bond with another person in a way he hasn't before. At the same time, he's also going to work on the principle behind the dean. So there's I think it's with Gail Winan that he eventually comes up with, well, I finally understand it now. Here, this is where he explains the idea of the first hander versus the second hander. So the big thing that changes about him is he's the totally self-contained guy who doesn't pay attention to other people at all, who over the years begins to actually do the work of understanding other people and making connections with other people and figuring out how other people react and what makes them tick. And that's sort of the character development. And it is very much, he's the same person, only more so, but the more so is he's the total individualist who focuses on reality and in his own mind and doesn't let other people influence him, but he grows to understand other people in a firsthand way. Now, the other thing I wanted to throw in here is I found it very interesting. I don't know whose the observation this was. I think it may have been Joia's, about how the Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged are both oriented around Dagny, but Dagny and Dominique are both sort of reacting to that is built around them as the person we see reacting to the events of the novel. And I think that it's really both, in a way, both novels are about a woman's reaction to the ideal man. Now you can see how Ayn Rand, as the writer, this is it's her personality shaping this. And it reminded me of a note she in one of her early short stories, and I'm not sure where she wrote this, but she had said about, this is one of her unpublished ones that was published late, in the late 80s or early 90s. But there's a note about it, about how she said that her own comment on this story was, I wasn't yet ready to write about the ideal man, but I was ready to write about the ideal woman's reaction to the ideal man. And I think it's The Husband I Bought may have been the story. Again, fairly obscure, it was never published, but I think she's still in the Fountainhead Atlas Shrugged. She's still writing about the ideal woman's reaction to the ideal man, because that was her personal outlook on things. And then the last thing I would do is the movie recommendation. So as we're coming for some of the stuff we're coming up to, I just realized it's a perfect movie to watch just to get the flavor of how this fits into the times. It's a 1940 movie called His Girl Friday, Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell. It's about Cary Grant is this sort of charming, roguishly, he's the charming rogue, as Cary Grant usually is. He's this roguishly charming and somewhat unscrupulous newspaper editor. And Rosalind Russell is his sort of ex-wife and sparring partner, who's this very witty, sharp, strong, independent woman who used to be a newspaper writer. And this is it was done in 1940. The director was Howard Hawks, who I think Ayn Rand ended up working with later on in Hollywood, and whose work she admired. It's written in 1940, just right in the middle of when Ayn Rand was writing this. And it's based on a 1928 play by, I think, Hecht is the guy's name, a 1928 play by a newspaperman who went on to write plays. So you can see how, 1928, it's right in the middle of when all these things are happening in the novel, when the Dominique Franken, the real life Dominique Frankens would have been working. So you can see how I think it's a fun movie to watch on its own merits, but you can also see how the characters and the setting and a lot of the sense of life, how some of the places she was getting it from things that were happening at exactly the same time as the events in the Fountainhead, or exactly the same time that she was writing the Fountainhead. So I think that would be a really good thing. If you have time, it's worth watching, and it would provide a lot of context for what we see with Dominique and what we see with Gail Wynand as well.
Thanks, Rob. I really love the dialogue in that movie.
Yes.
It is so powerful. Each sentence does so much.
It has this character that movies from that time have that you don't see very often today, which is like you have to be constantly paying attention. Every word matters. You really have to be on your toes to follow all the dialogue.
Wonderful. All right, folks.
Very active movie.
Yes.
I mean, you have to have an active
process of viewing.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Wait a second. The movie's name again is His Girl Friday.
Type it in.
I'll type it in here. There we go.
All right, so we'll type it in, and Shrika, you can do your.
Wonderful. All right, folks. So thank you very much. This was excellent. We will see you again 1 week from now, and we're going to do. We'll probably have to start doing more chapters per week. We'll figure all of that out. For now, try to read maybe till the end of part 2. Let's try to do that. Let's try to go to the end of part 2. I think that's a good unit. And then we get out of Elspeth Turi and on to Gail Wynand. Wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.